The baby should have been dead by morning. That was the first thought that cut through the winter air when Daniel Harris saw the small bundle shaking on the bench, half buried under falling snow, while the city around it glittered as if nothing were wrong. Chicago on Christmas Eve wore its beauty like armor. Lights draped the buildings along Michigan Avenue. Laughter spilled from restaurants, and carolers' voices floated between gusts of wind that sliced through wool coats and expensive scarves alike. Daniel moved through it all with the quiet efficiency of a man who knew exactly where he belonged. At 38, he carried himself with calm authority, tall, well-dressed, his presence unnoticed, because wealth that was truly secure rarely announced itself. His hand was wrapped around his daughter's, guiding her carefully through the slush. Emma Harris was 5 small and bundled in a pale pink coat that swallowed her frame. Her curls escaped from beneath her hat, catching snowflakes like tiny stars. She was talking about the tree they were supposed to see, about how it had to be bigger than last year, about how her mother would have loved the lights. Daniel listened, nodded, smiled when appropriate. He always did. The city saw a composed widower, a successful executive, a man who had learned how to function without letting the cracks show. Then Emma stopped. Not stumbled. Not hesitated. She stopped with a sudden stillness of instinct. Her hand tightened around Daniel's fingers, not in fear but urgency. She pointed her small arm, rigid against the wind. "Daddy," she said, her voice barely louder than the snow hitting pavement. "The baby is freezing." Daniel followed her gaze toward the bus stop at the corner. At first, he saw only shadow. Then the bench resolved into shape. A young woman sat hunched forward, her back curved protectively, her coat too thin for the night. In her arms was a bundle wrapped in a blanket, so worn it had lost its color. The wind lifted the edge of the fabric, and Daniel saw a tiny hand, red and trembling fingers curled in reflex against the cold. His chest tightened. Instinct, sharp and unwelcome, urged him to keep walking. Chicago had no shortage of suffering. He had learned painfully that you could not save everyone. He squeezed Emma's hand, ready to guide her past, ready to protect her from a world that took without asking. But Emma did not move. She looked up at him, eyes wide wet with something that had nothing to do with the cold. "Daddy," she repeated, firmer now. She's trying to keep him warm, but she can't. The woman on the bench shifted, even in sleep. Her arms tightened around the bundle as a stronger gust of wind tore through the street. The baby let out a sound that was barely a cry, more a fragile breath pushed past stiff lips. Daniel's mind betrayed him then. A memory surfaced uninvited, Rebecca pale against hospital sheets. The weight of a newborn he never got to bring home. A promise whispered into a room that smelled of antiseptic and grief. Take care of her. Teach her kindness. He exhaled slowly, the breath visible in the air. Without speaking, he unwound the thick scarf from around his own neck and then stopped. It was not his scarf he reached for, but Emma's. She watched him solemn as he took it from her shoulders. She did not protest. She did not ask questions. She simply nodded as if this were exactly what she had expected him to do. Daniel stepped toward the bench, his polished shoes crunching softly on ice. Up close, the woman looked impossibly young. 24, maybe younger. Blonde hair matted with snow, lips, cracked skin, ashen. He knelt, ignoring the cold seeping through his coat, and gently tucked the scarf around the baby, careful not to wake him fully. The infant's chest fluttered, and then stilled his tiny body, pressing instinctively into the sudden warmth. The woman stirred. Her eyes flew open, wild with fear. She clutched the baby tighter, pulling back. "Please," she rasped, her voice hoarse. I'm not asking for anything. Daniel met her gaze steady, unflinching. You're not, he said quietly. But he is. For a second she stared at him like he was a trick of the snow, something unreal the cold had invented. Behind him, Emma stood perfectly still, her small face set with fierce concern, as if daring the world to argue with her. That was the moment Daniel Harris made a choice that would dismantle everything he thought he knew about control, about distance, about survival. To anyone watching, he was just another passerby kneeling in the snow. No one would have guessed that the man offering warmth at a frozen bus stop held the power to change far more than one night. Daniel Harris had spent years training himself to walk away from loss, from chaos, from anything that threatened to reopen the carefully sealed compartments of his life. As he knelt in the snow beside the bench, the city roaring faintly behind him, every instinct screamed that this was exactly the kind of moment he was supposed to avoid. He was a man who solved problems with contracts and capital, not with cold hands and broken lives. And yet, here he was, his pulse loud in his ears, facing a choice he could not delegate, postpone, or escape. The young woman's eyes never left his hands. They tracked every movement as if he might disappear, or worse, take something from her. Daniel recognized that look. It was not ingratitude. It was defense. The posture of someone who had learned that help always came with a price. I'm not calling the police, he said quietly, reading the tension in her shoulders. I'm not taking your child. I just need you to listen. His voice was calm, practiced the same tone he used in boardrooms when everything was about to fall apart. Only this time, there was no script. Behind him, Emma shifted her weight, the cold finally beginning to reach her small body. Daniel felt it like a reprimand. He turned his head slightly and caught her eye. She wasn't scared. She wasn't impatient. She was watching him with an intensity that felt older than her 5 years, as if she were silently measuring whether he would live up to the man she believed him to be. That look landed harder than any accusation ever had. The woman swallowed. I just need the bus, she said, her voice cracking. It comes sometimes. Daniel glanced at the flickering sign above them. The schedule was a lie. At this hour in this weather, sometimes meant never. He straightened slowly, rolling the stiffness from his knees, and extended his hand not toward the baby, but toward her. It's too cold, he said. For both of you. You can come somewhere warm, just for the night. She laughed then, a short, brittle sound that carried no humor. People don't do that, she replied. Not for free. Daniel did not answer right away. He felt the weight of that sentence settle into him, heavy and deserved. I know, he said finally. But tonight I am. The woman hesitated, eyes darting past him to Emma, who had stepped closer without a word. Emma smiled, small and hopeful, as if warmth were contagious. The woman's grip on the baby loosened just enough to reveal his face. His lips were tinged blue. That decided it. Pride collapsed under instinct. She nodded once sharply, like someone agreeing to jump without looking down. Daniel shrugged out of his coat and draped it around her shoulders before she could protest. It was an expensive coat, tailored the kind people noticed. She stiffened. You don't have to, she said. I do, he replied, already dialing his phone. His driver answered on the first ring. Daniel gave an address clipped and precise, then ended the call. To the woman he said, My name is Daniel. This is my daughter Emma. He waited. After a beat, she said, Lauren. My son is Ethan. They walked together toward the curb, an odd trio stitched together by circumstance. Emma reached out without asking and tucked the scarf more securely around Ethan's chin. Lauren flinched, then let her. The car pulled up dark and quiet, blending into traffic, like it belonged nowhere in particular. Lauren froze again. "I can't afford a ride," she said, panic rising. Daniel opened the door. "You're not paying," he said. "Not tonight. Not ever." She stared at him, suspicion and exhaustion warring on her face. To her, he was just another man with money, another story, waiting to turn sharp. As the door closed and warmth enveloped them, Daniel caught his reflection in the glass. He saw not the executive the city thought it knew, but a man standing on the edge of something irreversible. He had not saved them yet. He had only refused to walk away. He did not know it then, but that refusal would cost him comfort, certainty, and the illusion that his power ended where his control did. Warmth felt dangerous to Lauren Mitchell. The moment the car doors sealed shut and the heater breathed life back into the air, her body reacted not with relief, but with panic. She held Ethan tighter, as if comfort itself might try to steal him away. The windows blurred with frost and city lights smeared into streaks of gold. And for the first time in weeks, the noise of Chicago faded into something distant, unreal. Across from her, Daniel Harris sat in silence, giving her space, his attention fixed on the road ahead, as if that were the safest way to prove he meant no harm. Emma climbed into the seat beside her small boots dangling. She leaned forward, studying Ethan with open curiosity, not the guarded glances Lauren had learned to expect. "He's really little," Emma whispered, as if afraid the words themselves might chill him. Lauren knotted her throat too tight to answer. She watched as Daniel adjusted the temperature higher without being asked, then handed back a bottle of warm water the driver had passed him. It was all so efficient, so practiced, that it unsettled her more than clumsy kindness ever could. The hotel rose from the street, like a mirage glass, and light cutting through the snow. Lauren's breath caught. This was not shelter. This was luxury. She shook her head before the car had even stopped. "I can't stay here," she said, the words tumbling over one another. "They'll ask for a card, an ID. I don't have anything." Daniel stepped out first, the cold snapping at his heels, then opened her door. "You don't need to," he said simply. "It's taken care of." The way he said it, calm and final, made it clear this was not an offer open for debate. Inside, the air smelled like polished stone and pine. Lauren's boots left wet prints on marble floors that reflected chandeliers above. Every instinct told her she was trespassing in someone else's life. Daniel spoke quietly to the staff, his tone respectful but absolute. No explanations. No glances in her direction that suggested shame. They moved as if this were routine, as if people like her belonged here too. That more than anything made her chest ache. The room was warm, almost unbearably so. Heat wrapped around her, sinking into her bones, and suddenly her legs trembled. Daniel set Ethan down gently in a bassinet that had appeared without question. He asked what the baby needed, not what she needed. That distinction mattered. Lauren swallowed hard. "Formula," she said. "Diapers." Daniel nodded and made another call. No sigh, no hesitation. Emma perched on the edge of the bed, watching Ethan like he was something miraculous. When the door finally closed and Daniel stepped back, giving her the room, the silence pressed in. Lauren stood frozen until she heard Ethan's breathing even out the color slowly returning to his cheeks. Only then did her shoulders sag. She turned on the shower and stared at herself in the mirror while the water warmed. The woman staring back looked older than 24. Hollow eyes, skin stretched thin by survival. She barely recognized the girl who used to stay up late in dorm rooms, sketching faces, dreaming of gallery walls and light-filled studios. The water washed over her, and she bit down on her hand to keep from making a sound as tears came hot and sudden. She cried for the nights on the street, for the friends who had vanished, for the parents who had chosen reputation over their daughter. She cried because the warmth felt like forgiveness she did not deserve. When she stepped out wrapped in a robe too soft to be real, Ethan slept peacefully full for the first time that day. Lauren sat beside him on the bed, afraid to lie down, afraid this moment would shatter if she relaxed. Somewhere beyond the walls, the city kept moving, indifferent as ever. But inside that room, something fragile had shifted. For the first time since Ethan was born, she allowed herself to believe that morning might come without fear. Morning arrived quietly, not with sirens or shouts, but with pale winter light slipping through the curtains like a cautious visitor. Lauren woke in a panic, her body tensing before her mind caught up. For one sharp second, she did not know where she was. Then she heard Ethan's soft breathing, steady and warm, and the unfamiliar stillness of safety settled over her like something borrowed. The bed beneath her was real. The warmth was real. That knowledge made her chest ache in a way hunger never had. She moved slowly, afraid of breaking the spell. Ethan stirred his small face, creasing before relaxing again, and Lauren felt tears press behind her eyes. He had color now. His hands were no longer clenched tight against the cold, but loose, trusting. She fed him with the formula that had appeared sometime during the night, marveling at how easily the world functioned here, how needs were met before desperation had time to grow. It frightened her how quickly she could get used to this. A knock came at the door. Lauren froze. Old instincts flared. She wrapped an arm around Ethan and approached cautiously. When she opened it, Emma stood there bundled in a bright coat, clutching a small gift bag nearly as big as her torso. Her smile was tentative, as if she sensed that joy itself might need permission. "Merry Christmas," she said, proud and gentle all at once. "I brought something for Ethan." Daniel stood a few steps behind her, hands in his pockets, deliberately giving Lauren space. He looked different in daylight, less like a man carved from certainty, and more like someone quietly carrying weight. Lauren stepped aside, letting them in, suddenly acutely aware of her bare face, the borrowed robe, the way she did not belong in this clean-ordered world. Emma wasted no time. She tiptoed toward the bed and peered at Ethan like he was a secret treasure. "He's smaller than my doll," she whispered, awed. Daniel watched the scene unfold, something tightening behind his ribs. This was not charity. This was connection. He saw it in the way Emma's voice softened, in the way Lauren's shoulders eased despite herself. He cleared his throat gently. "We don't want to intrude," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right." Lauren nodded, unable to find words that didn't feel inadequate. "Thank you," felt too small. "Sorry," felt misplaced. They talked quietly. Simple things. Names, coffee preferences. Emma showed Lauren the ornaments she had drawn pictures of, explaining each one with solemn importance. Lauren listened, surprised by how easily laughter slipped back into her voice, rusty but real. For a brief stretch of time, she was not a problem to be solved. She was a person in a room on Christmas morning. When Daniel finally stood to leave, Lauren felt an unexpected flicker of fear. Not of him, but of what came after. He paused at the door. "We'll check on you later," he said. "There's no rush. Stay as long as you need today." He meant it. She could hear it in the absence of conditions. After they left, Lauren sat on the bed with Ethan asleep against her chest, the gift bag resting beside her. Inside was a soft knit hat, impossibly small. She pressed it to her face, breathing in the faint scent of something clean and new. Outside, the city glittered, indifferent as ever. Inside, a fragile, unfamiliar feeling took root. hope. Daniel Harris did not believe in rescuing people. He believed in systems and leverage in creating conditions where outcomes could change without turning anyone into a dependent. That belief was the reason he did not offer Lauren Mitchell an open-ended promise or a dramatic solution. Instead, 3 days after Christmas, he sat across from her at the small kitchen table of the hotel suite and laid out something far more unsettling than charity structure. "I have a guest house," he said, folding his hands as if this were a business discussion, which in many ways it was. North of the city, quiet, warm. "You and Ethan can stay there for 1 month." Lauren stiffened immediately, her instincts flaring. A month meant an end date. An end date meant the street waiting patiently at the edge of the calendar. "I don't want to owe you anything," she said. Her voice was steady, but her grip tightened around her coffee mug. Daniel met her gaze without flinching. "You won't," he replied. "That's the point." He explained the terms carefully. No rent, no press, no strings disguised as generosity. But there was one condition, and he did not soften it. "You need to work," he said. "Not for me. For yourself. I won't take that from you." Lauren stared at him, unsure whether to feel insulted or relieved. No one had demanded anything of her in months except survival. The idea that he expected more, not less, unsettled her. "I don't have childcare," she said. "I don't have experience anyone wants." Daniel shook his head slightly. "You have skills," he said, "and the work can be remote, flexible, if you want it." The guest house was nothing like Lauren expected. It was modest compared to the city penthouse, but it was solid quiet filled with light. A place that felt designed to hold people without swallowing them. She stood in the doorway with Ethan on her hip, afraid to step fully inside, as if ownership might be contagious. Emma ran ahead, declaring which room was whose, already claiming Ethan as part of the landscape. Lauren watched something aching softly in her chest. The work came slowly at first. Simple design tasks, internal documents, low-pressure projects Daniel routed through his assistant, careful to keep his distance. Lauren worked while Ethan slept, then worked with him balanced against her shoulder, rediscovering muscles in her mind she had not used in a year. The first time she sent a completed file and received a response that said simply, "This is good work." She cried in the kitchen, silent tears slipping down her face, while Ethan gurgled at the ceiling fan. Emma visited often, sometimes with Daniel, sometimes with the housekeeper. She treated Lauren not like someone temporary, but like someone inevitable. She asked questions. She listened. She brought drawings to show her and demanded opinions with fierce seriousness. Lauren found herself laughing more than she had in years, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. At night, after Ethan slept, she would sit with a sketch pad Daniel had quietly left on the counter and draw until her hands ached. What Daniel saw watching from a careful distance was not a woman being saved. He saw someone rebuilding herself piece by piece with stubborn dignity. And what Lauren slowly realized in the quiet hours when the house held its breath was that this help did not make her smaller. It was giving her room to stand. The first sign that kindness had become a liability came quietly disguised as curiosity. Lauren noticed it in the way strangers lingered too long at the edge of the property, in the unfamiliar car that slowed near the guest house, before continuing on in the subtle shift of Daniel's posture whenever his phone rang. Power, she was learning, always attracted attention, and not all of it was benign. What she did not expect was to become part of the leverage. Daniel tried to shield her from it at first. He always had. He had built his life around absorbing impact so others did not have to. But this was different. This was personal. A competitor named Richard Coleman had been circling Daniel's company for months, probing for weakness, exploiting any deviation from the image of ruthless focus investors like to see. Lauren's presence, her past, her vulnerability, became an opportunity dressed up as concern. Rumors began to surface. Whispers of distraction, questions about judgment. The narrative formed, quickly sharpened by people who had never met her and never intended to. Lauren felt it the afternoon. A woman approached the gate with a camera slung casually at her side, smiling like a friend. "Just a few questions," she said, her eyes already scanning the windows. "People are fascinated by stories of redemption." Lauren's stomach dropped. She closed the distance between them, deliberately placing herself where the lens could not reach. "You need to leave," she said, her voice calm but unyielding. The woman's smile tightened. "You don't get to control this," she replied. "Not when powerful men are involved." That night, Lauren sat at the small kitchen table long after Ethan had fallen asleep, the weight of the encounter pressing down on her. She thought of Emma, of how easily a photograph could turn a child into collateral damage. She thought of Daniel already carrying enough without this. The next day, the offer came exactly as fear often predicts. A man in an expensive coat appeared unannounced, his confidence filling the doorway before he spoke. "Richard Coleman," he said smoothly. "I think we can help each other." He laid it out without pretense. A job, an apartment, security. All she had to do was leave. Quietly. Publicly, if possible. "You deserve stability," he said, eyes sharp. "And Daniel deserves fewer distractions." The implication was clear. She was the problem. Lauren felt something old and furious rise in her chest. "You're not offering me opportunity," she said. "You're offering me silence." Coleman smiled thinly. "Call it whatever helps you sleep." Lauren closed the door in his face, hands shaking only after the lock slid into place. She did not cry. She did not panic. She waited. When Daniel arrived later that evening, one look at her told him everything. She told him the truth, all of it, without softening the edges. The offer. The threat. The way her past was being sharpened into a weapon. Daniel listened, jaw tight, his usual composure cracking to reveal something harder beneath. "This is my fault," he said finally. "I should have seen this coming." "No," Lauren replied, surprising them both with the steadiness of her voice. "This is what happens when people confuse power with entitlement." She hesitated, then said the words she'd been turning over all day. "Maybe I should leave. Maybe that's the cleanest way." Daniel's reaction was immediate and unrestrained. "Absolutely not," he said. "That's exactly what he wants. You are not a problem to be managed. You are a person being targeted." The truth sat heavy between them. Lauren knew he was right. She also knew that staying would make things harder before they got easier. That night after Daniel left, she stood by the window, watching snow begin to fall again, each flake dissolving on the glass. She understood now that help did not end with gratitude. Sometimes it demanded resistance. She had survived worse than public scrutiny. She would not allow her life or Ethan's to be traded for someone else's comfort. For the first time, Lauren was not afraid of the storm gathering around them. She was ready to stand in it. Love did not arrive for Lauren Mitchell like a sudden revelation. It crept in quietly, disguised as routine, as shared silences, as the unexpected calm she felt when Daniel Harris was near. She noticed it in the smallest moments, the way his presence steadied the room without demanding attention, and the way he listened without trying to fix her, the way he looked at Ethan. Not with obligation, but with genuine care. These were not the gestures of a man playing savior. They were the habits of someone choosing again and again to show up. That realization terrified her. Lauren had learned the hard way that dependence was dangerous. Gratitude could turn into debt. Affection could be mistaken for obligation. She refused to let herself become another fragile thing Daniel felt responsible for. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed and Ethan slept in the next room, Lauren said it out loud, forcing the words past the tightness in her chest. "I don't want you to think I'm here because I need you." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Good," he said. "Because that's not why I'm here either." He told her then what he had never articulated so plainly. After his wife died, he had built a life designed for survival, not joy. Everything was efficient, predictable, safe. Emma was the exception, the one place where feeling was unavoidable. "You disrupted that," he said, not as an accusation, but as an admission. "Not because you needed help. Because you reminded me that shutting down isn't the same as healing." Lauren listened, the weight of his honesty settling between them. She admitted her own fear, the one she had been circling since Christmas Eve. "I don't want to mistake safety for love," she said. "I need to know that if I choose this, it's because I want you, not because my life got easier around you." Daniel nodded, something like relief softening his features. "Then we take it slowly," he said, "as equals. No rescues, no obligations." Emma made the decision before either of them did. Children often did. One afternoon, while Lauren was sketching at the kitchen table, Emma climbed into her lap without asking and rested her head against Lauren's shoulder. "You feel like home," she said simply. The words landed with quiet force. Lauren closed her eyes, emotion pressing hard against restraint. That night alone in the guest house, Lauren understood the truth she could no longer avoid. Love, real love, was not a debt. It was a choice made from strength, not need. And for the first time in her life, she was strong enough to choose. 1 year later, the bench was empty. Snow rested lightly on its wooden slats, untouched the bus sign above it, flickering the same dull yellow it had that night. Daniel Harris stood still, hands in his coat pockets, while the city moved around him, indifferent and alive. Beside him, Lauren Mitchell held Ethan, no longer a fragile infant, but a sturdy toddler with flushed cheeks and curious eyes. Emma stood between them, her gloved hand wrapped tightly around Lauren's fingers, as if afraid the world might try to take her back. They had not planned to come here, not consciously. But some places pull you back, demanding acknowledgement. Daniel looked at the bench and remembered how close he had come to walking past it, how easily his life could have remained smaller, safer, quieter. He felt Lauren's presence beside him, solid and real, and knew that everything he valued now had grown from that single moment of pause. Life had not turned magically perfect. The months that followed had been work, real work. Lauren finished her contract and earned a full-time position based on merit alone. Her designs began to circulate, her name appearing without an asterisk, without explanation. She reclaimed her identity piece by piece, not as someone who had been saved, but as someone who had fought her way back. Daniel weathered the fallout of scrutiny and emerged stronger, his company intact, his priorities rearranged. Emma thrived in the presence of 2 adults who chose her every day. Ethan took his first steps on solid floors, never knowing the cold he had escaped. Daniel turned to Lauren, the weight of something unsaid pressing gently but insistently between them. He reached into his pocket and felt the familiar shape waiting there. "I had planned to do this somewhere else," he said quietly, his voice steady but unguarded. "But this feels honest." Lauren looked at him, understanding dawning even before he knelt, even before the ring caught the pale winter light. "I don't want a life built on gratitude," Daniel said, meeting her eyes. "I want a life built with you. With all of it. The past, the work, the mess. Will you choose that with me?" Lauren felt tears blur her vision, not from fear, not from disbelief, but from certainty. She had never been chosen without conditions before. She nodded, then laughed softly through tears. "Yes," she said, "I choose you." Emma clapped delighted, as if this were simply the natural conclusion she had been waiting for all along. Ethan babbled, reaching for the ring with determined curiosity. The city continued on, unaware that something quiet and monumental had just settled into place. As they walked away from the bench hand in hand, Lauren glanced back once more. What had begun there as desperation had ended in intention. She understood now that kindness, when offered without control, did not weaken lives. It expanded them. And sometimes stopping for a freezing baby did not just save one night. It built a future. From a psychological and social perspective, this story is not simply about kindness. It is about agency. True help does not strip people of dignity, nor does it create dependence. It creates space. Space to recover, to rebuild identity, to make choices from strength instead of fear. Daniel did not save Lauren by money or power alone. He saved her by refusing to define her by her worst moment. And Lauren did not rise because she was rescued. She rose because someone believed she was capable of standing on her own again. Experts in trauma recovery often emphasize one critical truth: healing begins when a person is seen as whole, not broken. This is what transformed a freezing bench into a family, and a single pause into a lifelong bond. Compassion paired with boundaries is not weakness. It is leadership. It is how individual lives change and how societies quietly become better. If this story moved you, if it made you pause, reflect, or see the world a little differently, consider supporting this channel by liking the video and subscribing. It helps stories like this reach more people who might need them at exactly the right moment. And before you go, leave a comment with just 2 words: choose kindness. Sometimes that choice is all it takes to change everything.